New York, 1964. Malcolm X steps onto the podium, his eyes scanning the crowd. He pauses for a second, then speaks with unwavering resolve. Freedom, by any means necessary. It wasn't just a slogan, it was a declaration of war, one that made all of America take notice. But just a year later, Malcolm X spoke of brotherhood between races, a shocking transformation, and one that put a target on his back. So what happened? How did a warrior of the Nation of Islam, a man who once declared that white people were the devil, come to preach reconciliation? What led Malcolm X to abandon his old path in pursuit of an entirely different truth? And most importantly, was this transformation an awakening or a death sentence? His pilgrimage to Mecca changed him. But that very awakening left him isolated. His former brothers called him a traitor. His old enemies doubted his change of heart. From by any means necessary to brotherhood, this wasn't just Malcolm X's transformation. It was the price of truth. And for Malcolm X, what was that price? Join us as we uncover the story. You wake up in the middle of the night. Thick black smoke fills the air. Flames dance across the walls. Screams, shattering glass. A scene of chaos you can't fully comprehend. But one thing is clear, this was no accident. The year was 1929, and that child was Malcolm Little, the boy who would one day become Malcolm X. That night was just the beginning of the tragedies that would shape his entire life. Malcolm's father, Earl Little, was a Baptist preacher, a fierce advocate for black rights. He believed in Marcus Garvey's vision, that black people deserved a homeland where they would be truly free. But in America, ideas like that weren't just unwelcome. They were dangerous. Malcolm's family faced constant threats, and one day their home was burned to the ground. But that wasn't the worst of it. 2 years later, Malcolm's father was found dead on the railroad tracks under mysterious circumstances. Officials ruled it an accident, but his family never believed that. They were convinced there was something far more sinister behind it. A lost father, a broken mother. Louise Little, a strong and determined woman, fought to keep her family together. But she wasn't just battling poverty. She was fighting a welfare system designed to strip black families of everything they had. In 1939, that system won. Despite her resilience, the weight of loss finally broke her. She was institutionalized in a psychiatric hospital where she would remain for the next 25 years. And Malcolm? 14 years old. No home, no family. He was sent to foster care. His siblings were separated. No one stayed together. The boy who would become Malcolm X grew up with a pain that never faded. But from the ashes of his childhood, something ignited. Not fear, not despair, rage. Boston, 1940s. A young man fresh out of the foster care system steps into the dazzling city. Malcolm Little, a name no one knew yet. Malcolm had come to Boston to live with Ella Collins, his half-sister, a woman he barely knew. But Ella wasn't like the other women in his family. She was strong, independent, a symbol of black success. To Malcolm, she was a ticket out of his painful past. But escaping the past doesn't mean escaping temptation. Malcolm was quickly drawn into Roxbury, Boston's vibrant black neighborhood, where jazz clubs, high-stakes gambling, and lavish parties created a world unlike anything he had ever known. Neon lights flickered, sharp suits gleamed, laughter echoed over the turn of a card. It was a world where only the strong survived. And Malcolm? He wanted to win. It wasn't long before he went deeper. Harlem, New York, a bigger stage, a more dangerous game. Malcolm became Detroit Red, a hustler who knew how to work the system, how to survive in a world where everything had a price. But every game has an end. In 1946, at just 21 years old, Malcolm took part in a burglary that should have been a clean job. It wasn't. He got caught. His sentence? 8 to 10 years in prison, harsher than usual. Why? Maybe because of the racial prejudice of the time. Maybe because the system wanted to make an example out of him. But whatever the reason, the cell door slammed shut. And in the darkness of that prison, a new Malcolm X was beginning to take shape. In the early years of his sentence, Malcolm was far from a model prisoner. Hot-tempered, defiant, he often clashed with guards and inmates alike. To him, prison was just another cage, another way the system kept black men in check. But then something happened. A letter arrived. It was from his brother, Reginald. and it carried a message that would change Malcolm's life forever. Reginald had joined the Nation of Islam, a growing religious movement led by Elijah Muhammad. He urged Malcolm to rethink everything he thought he knew. Why do we carry the names of those who enslaved our ancestors? Why do we bow to a system designed to keep us down? These words struck a deep chord within Malcolm. He had always felt the weight of racial injustice, but for the first time he had a framework to understand it. He wasn't just angry, he was awakening. The days of hustling on the streets of Boston and Harlem were over. In prison, Malcolm found a new addiction: knowledge. He devoured books on history, philosophy, religion, and the untold stories of African greatness, the kind of knowledge American schools conveniently left out. He even took the extraordinary step of copying an entire dictionary by hand, expanding his vocabulary, sharpening his ability to speak. More than that, he learned Arabic to read the Quran in its original language, deepening his understanding of Islam. He wasn't just learning, he was transforming. By the time he walked free in 1952, Malcolm was no longer Malcolm Little. He realized that name had never truly been his. It had been given to his ancestors by slave masters generations ago. He cast it aside, replacing it with X, a symbol of the lost lineage stolen from his people. Malcolm X didn't just join the Nation of Islam, he became its most electrifying voice. His words, razor-sharp, sliced through America's illusions about race. With charisma and conviction, he drew thousands into the NOI, turning it from a fringe sect into a nationwide movement. In just a decade, he was no longer an ex-convict. He was a leader, a force to be reckoned with. Malcolm X quickly rose to become one of the most powerful speakers of the Nation of Islam, NOI. With razor-sharp rhetoric and an unshakable mind, he didn't just capture the attention of Black America, he made the entire country listen. When Malcolm X took the stage, he wasn't just spreading ideology, he was a warrior for justice. Bold, unapologetic, and relentless, he asked the hard questions. About a broken system, about racial injustice, about what true freedom really meant. Unlike Martin Luther King Jr., who championed nonviolent resistance, Malcolm X believed that freedom must be protected by any means necessary. And he didn't just talk, he commanded attention. Whether on radio, television, or in the press, Malcolm X turned every interview into a powerful speech, igniting a sense of pride and defiance in Black communities. But with that power came controversy. His rise wasn't just a concern for the U.S. government, it also created tensions within the NOI. As Malcolm X gained influence, he began to see cracks in the foundation of the organization, especially regarding scandals surrounding its leader, Elijah Muhammad. The more he questioned, the more he found himself at odds with the movement he once devoted his life to. Then came the turning point. In 1963, after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, Malcolm X made a statement that shook the nation. America is reaping what it has sown. The NOI responded swiftly, silencing him with a 90-day speech ban. For the first time in years, Malcolm X was forced into silence. But was this the end, or the beginning of something even greater? By 1964, he walked away from the Nation of Islam, stepping into a completely new chapter of his life. This time, he wasn't speaking for an organization, he was speaking for himself, for change, and for a new future. In 1964, Malcolm X boarded a plane, leaving behind a deeply divided America for a land he had never set foot in, Mecca. He had no idea this journey would completely change the way he saw the world and himself. Mecca was unlike anything Malcolm had ever known. There he witnessed thousands of pilgrims from across the globe, Black, white, Arab, Asian, all kneeling side by side in prayer. No divisions, no hatred, just people, equal before God, united in faith. It was a revelation. For years, Malcolm X had believed that racial oppression was the root of injustice. But in Mecca, he shared meals, drank from the same cup, and slept on the same floor as men whose skin was whiter than snow, whose hair was golden like wheat. And they didn't treat him with suspicion or superiority. They treated him like a brother. In a letter from Mecca, he wrote, "I have eaten from the same plate, drank from the same cup, and slept on the same rug, with fellow Muslims whose eyes were the bluest of blue, whose hair was the blondest of blonde, and whose skin was the whitest of white. And in their words and actions, I felt the same warmth of the sun that fills my own heart with joy." For the first time in his life, Malcolm realized that the real enemy wasn't skin color. It was the system that divided people. When he returned to America, he was no longer the same man. He walked away from the Nation of Islam, the organization he had once been the face of. Instead, he founded the Organization of Afro-American Unity, OAAU, with a mission far greater than before. Not just to fight for Black Americans, but to unite all oppressed people around the world. February 21, 1965. Audubon Ballroom, Harlem. A Sunday afternoon, Malcolm X stepped onto the stage ready to address his supporters. But he didn't know that, in mere moments, gunfire would erupt, and his life would end right then and there. Shots rang out. Panic filled the room. Malcolm X collapsed before the eyes of his wife and children. A leader was assassinated, a dream left unfinished. But could a bullet truly kill an idea? 3 members of the Nation of Islam were convicted. But this case was far from simple. Talmadge Hayer, the only suspect caught at the scene, admitted to pulling the trigger, but also insisted that the 2 other men were innocent. And so for decades the question remained, who was really behind Malcolm X's assassination? The FBI, the CIA, the NYPD? Declassified documents have revealed that the US government closely monitored Malcolm X, viewing him as a threat. Some theories suggest other forces were involved, but concrete proof? To this day, the full truth remains unknown. In 2021, 2 of the 3 convicted men were exonerated, after more than 50 years. By 2024, Malcolm X's family was still fighting, filing a $100 million lawsuit demanding that the US government release classified documents related to his assassination. But what truly matters? Malcolm X was killed, but his ideas were not. His name continues to echo in movements for justice, in music, in art, and in the hearts of millions who yearn for equality. The autobiography of Malcolm X, co-written with Alex Haley, became a classic, a journey from darkness to light, from struggle to enlightenment. Today, when people think of Malcolm X, they don't just remember an activist. They remember a man who dared to change, who dared to learn, and who fought until his last breath. And he once asked a powerful question. I am ready to die for what I believe in. But are you ready to live for what you believe in? So what's your answer?